Alright, this segment is about absolute value and solving simple equations that have absolute value in them. Basically what we're going to do is follow the same rules that we generally do for algebra and try to isolate the variable. In this case, since there's an absolute value involved, what we'll do is we'll try to isolate the absolute value, whatever's in the absolute value sign. So let's just start off with an example. Remember, the absolute value has those two tall lines. And so it's absolute value of W plus 11 equals 21. So to solve this, we want to isolate what's in the absolute value, the whole absolute value itself. So to do that, we need to get rid of the 11. Since the 11 is being added, we undo that by subtracting. And what we do to one side of the equation, we do to the other side of the equation. And now we rewrite. Now we have the absolute value of W equals, and 21 take away 11 is going to give us 10. Now to solve it, we need to think, what numbers can we put in the absolute value sign and get a 10 out of it? Well, since absolute value basically means the distance, the number of units from 0, the W could be 10, because 10 is 10 units away from 0, and W can also be negative 10, because negative 10 is also 10 units away from 0. So that would also work. So we end up having two answers for that particular equation. Alright, let's try another example. Let's say we have the absolute value of y minus 18 equals negative 14. In this case, again, we're trying to isolate the absolute value of y, so that means we need to get rid of the 18. Since the 18 is being subtracted, we're going to do the opposite, which is adding. That makes the 18 disappear from that side. What we do to one side of the equation, we have to do to the other. And now we rewrite for our second step. And negative 14 plus 18 is going to give us a positive 4. So what numbers can we put in when we take the absolute value of them? Do we get positive 4? Well, there's definitely two answers for that. The absolute value of 4 is 4, and the absolute value of negative 4 is also positive 4. So there we have our two solutions for that as well. The third example of this will look a little bit similar. It just has a different operation attached to it. Negative 6 times the absolute value of V equals 18. Again, we need to isolate the absolute value signs and what's inside of it, so we need to get rid of that negative 6. This time the number is multiplying with the absolute value, so to undo it and get rid of the negative 6, we need to divide both sides by negative 6. These will cancel out, and when we rewrite, we have the absolute value of V equals negative 3. So even though we've handled it like a normal algebraic equation, this actually is kind of a trick question, because what we're being asked now is what number, when we take the absolute value of it, will give us negative 3. And that's sneaky, because there is no number that when we take the absolute value of it, we'll get a negative number. So there is no solution for this equation. There's no number that we can put in and take the absolute value of it and get negative 3. So it's just not going to happen. So you just write no solution. Let's kick it up a notch now, and let's just look at something that's a little more complicated, just in the fact that what's inside the absolute value sign is not just a simple letter. So if we take the absolute value of 6y minus 18, close our absolute value sign, equals 12, the first step in something of this case would be to get the absolute value sign all by itself. That's already done for us, so we don't have any manipulating to do at this point. So what we're going to do, and I'll explain in a minute why, we're going to break this out into two equations. We want to say that 6y take away 18 can equal 12, because that's what can happen. We might get a positive number inside the absolute value, and it will equal positive 12. And the other thing that we need to take into consideration is that 6y minus 18 could also equal negative 12. We're not saying it would equal the absolute value being negative 12. We're saying that whatever comes out of 6y minus 18, it could equal a negative 12, and then when we take the absolute value of that, it will be positive 12. So the hard and fast rule is you split the equation into two different ones by dropping the absolute value sign, setting one equation equal to the number that you're given, and setting it equal to the opposite sign of what you're given. And now we're just down to your basic two-step equation. Again, you should feel really comfortable about these. To get rid of the 18, we're going to add it to both sides. So then we have 6y equals 30, dividing it by 6, y is going to equal 5. So that's going to be one of our possible answers. Let's go over to the other equation, and the steps are going to be exactly the same. We're going to add 18 to get rid of it. This time we're going to get a different number on the right hand side of our equation. Negative 12 plus 18 is going to give us a positive 6. And then we divide by 6. So y equals 1. And you can double check your answers. If you're not feeling like, oh, this is right, plug 5 back into the original. So the original equation is 6 times 5 minus 18. Does that equal 12? Let's see if I can slide this up a little bit. And then just evaluate it. Follow your PEMDAS. 6 times 5 is 30. So then we have the absolute value of 30 minus 18. And does that equal 12? Well, lo and behold, the absolute value of 12 is 12. So that's one way to check it. You can also check your other solution, plugging in y equals 1. So this time we would have the absolute value of 6 times 1 minus 18 equals 12. 6 times 1 is 6. That's a minus sign. 6 take away 18, that's negative 12, and we take the absolute value of negative 12. Again, we get 12 equals 12. So both of our solutions work. It doesn't hurt at all to check your answers. It's actually a really good idea, rather than just kind of like, oh, I'm not sure, and just letting it go. Let's try another one of those suckers. Hold on. All right, how about we try, let's see, we'll do absolute value of 4y minus 16 equals 12. I didn't mean to make it equal 12 again, but it does. Again, our first step is done for us. We don't have to do anything to get the absolute value isolated. It already is all by itself on one side of the equation. So now we split it into two equations. We set it equal to as the equation's written, we basically just drop the absolute value signs. That's one of them. The second equation is, again, we drop the absolute value signs, but we make the number negative. And just solve each of them. And again, this is your basic two-step equation. It should feel really comfortable. We've done a lot of these by now. 12 plus 16 is going to give us 28. And again, just showing your workout. 28 divided by 4 is 7. So that's one of our answers. Going over to the other equation, same exact steps, which makes it a little bit easier. Negative 12 plus 16 is going to give us a positive 4. Again, we need to divide by 4. And 4 divided by 4 gives us 1. So those are our two answers for y. Either one would work. Alright, why don't you try this one, write it down, and then hit the pause button, work it out, hit the play button, and see if you and I end up getting the same answers. This one is the absolute value of 6u plus 9 is equal to 3. Alright, so hit that pause button and give it a whirl. Alright, what we're going to do is we're going to break it out into the two equations. The first equation, we're just dropping that absolute value sign and we're going to solve it. The second equation is we're going to drop the absolute value sign and we're going to set it equal to a negative 3. So 6u plus 9 equals 3. We're going to subtract the 9 from both sides. And when we rewrite, we get 6u equals negative 6. And one of our answers is going to be negative 1. On the other equation, same deal. We subtract 9. When we rewrite, we get 6u equals negative 12. When we divide through on both sides by 6, we get u equals negative 2. So your two answers should be negative 2 and negative 1. Alright, let's look at one more together. This one's worth looking at just to keep in mind exactly what's going on and what we're being asked to do. So let's take the absolute value of 5x minus 15 equals negative 5. And again, we're tempted to break out and make the two equations like normal, but you have to keep in mind what the big picture of absolute value is. And this equation is actually saying, what can we do where we take the absolute value of it that will give us a negative 5? And if you remember, the absolute value of something can never equal a negative number. So you don't even have to do anything else as long as you keep in mind that an absolute value of something can't equal a negative number, and you just write no solution. It's impossible to take the absolute value of anything and get a negative number out of it. So sometimes you can save yourself some work if you can keep something like that in mind. Alright, thanks. I hope you followed this okay. If you want some more practice or you have some questions, feel free to find me. Thanks.